What work moment made your attitude go from proud employee to I am just here for the paycheck? Story 1. I worked in an office of 4 people. 3 handled basic tasks, like emails, phone calls, managing orders, and customer service, while the fourth managed invoices, which was very time-consuming, along with stocks, deliveries, payments, and more. I was a good employee, perhaps one of the best in the company, often praised by customers more than criticized. Even so, in retail, the best employee can still receive complaints from outraged customers. 2 girls in my office became close friends. I was the only male. We often complained about being underappreciated and underpaid. That seems to be the worker's lot in life. Still, I liked my job and felt fairly compensated, about as much as I would be in any other company. The extra work I did at home, during the day, and in overtime made me much more hardworking than anyone else in the company, apart from my bosses. I knew how hard they worked personally. No complaints there. Later, they hired a general director in charge of pay, promotions, and bonuses. He was a good director, managed disputes well, gave me a few raises, and often gave all of us a Christmas or New Year's bonus, a very nice gesture of appreciation. At one point, the bonuses stopped. I was promised a special reward if I secured a difficult contract for the company. My coworker found the company online. I convinced them to do business with us, and the partnership has continued for years, but the extra reward never came. I waited a whole year with no response and eventually had to go there in person to force them to pay. It was very unpleasant. They reluctantly agreed, but denied ever promising it. I had my coworker as a witness, so I won. Things went back to normal for a while, but my female coworkers decided they wanted to be stay-at-home moms. One July, both, within 2 weeks of each other, became pregnant and submitted doctor's notes claiming their pregnancies were risky, forcing them to stay home. Suddenly, I was the only person handling 3 people's jobs. I slaved at the company until April of the following year, 10 long months. This included the very busy December when Christmas triples the number of orders, and January when suppliers are closed, orders pile up, and goods are scarce. I received no thanks for my hard work from my bosses or the director. Usually, at the end of the year or the beginning of the next, when I received a bonus or yearly raise, the director would talk to me, ask if I was happy, tell me I was a good worker, praise my contributions, and give me the boss handshake. It felt good to be appreciated. When the company lost 2 people, they did not replace them for 10 months and never expressed any thanks or appreciation for my work. Bonuses and raises also stopped that year. It seemed the bosses blamed all the workers for the 2 girls leaving. They left because the pay was low and the job was hard, though their pregnancies gave them a few months of paid leave. 10 long, hard months passed without a single thank you, not even a $10 burger coupon as a token of appreciation. Suppliers and wholesalers regularly sent the company such gifts as thanks. Most went unused or were given to family and friends. I received them a few times at Christmas. The following year, I was ready to talk to my general director and tell him I was no longer happy and felt poorly treated, but the yearly talks and bonuses stopped completely, so I thought, forget it. I discovered Reddit and started bringing headphones to the office. Now I plug them in, listen to YouTube, and browse Reddit. I still work and do a fair amount of overtime, but I no longer care as much and let others take on more work while I do far less personally. I am still one of the most important employees. When my boss goes on holiday, I act as his replacement, handling orders and managing key business tasks. But I no longer work late as I used to, and I often put important tasks off until the next day or after the weekend. I also take more holidays. Previously, I never fully used my mandatory leave and was never actually paid for it. Last year I started tracking it and finally made them pay what they legally owed me for unused holidays. I no longer care about much besides the money. Before we continue, do us a quick favor, smash that like button, and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. I worked at a company for 3 years that was a very successful small player in a large market segment. Much of their success came from the owner and CEO's vision of listening to employees and fast-tracking new ideas as quickly as possible. Whether it was a product idea or a process improvement, he made sure to value everyone's input equally. Whether you were a janitor, a secretary, worked on the phones, in research and development, or in manufacturing, he listened and took all ideas seriously. He also believed in the importance of incentives. As such, he regularly ran contests for the various departments in the company, fun, friendly competitions to boost sales or trim expenses. Salespeople would receive bonuses for record months. Even the staff who worked on the phones could earn a monthly party if their call times were shorter and their volume higher than projections. On the last Friday of every month, there was a big family-style barbecue in the warehouse where we cooked up plenty of meat, and people brought sides and desserts while the company provided beverages and a place to eat. It was always a great way for everyone to mingle and feel equal. Most importantly, if you were with the company for an entire quarter, you were considered an integral part of that quarter's profits and received a profit-sharing check. During our product line expansion, nearly everyone was receiving profit-sharing checks of over $1,000. It was great. Then, at a Friday barbecue planned around the time we were to receive our profit-sharing checks, it was announced that the owner was stepping down as CEO and the CFO would take over. On that bombshell alone, many people felt a pit in their stomach, as the CFO was already well known for being difficult to work with. Upon that announcement, we were told we would all be receiving our profit-sharing checks. Yay! Then came the follow-up. This will be your last profit-sharing check. What the heck? But don't worry, it will be replaced by something much better. Just you wait. Ooh. After the handout of our largest profit sharing yet, another announcement was made. This will be the last monthly barbecue we will hold, and effective immediately, all incentive programs across departments will be phased out to focus more on individual performance. The mood in the room quickly shifted from gloomy to hostile. Mind you, these announcements came back to back in less time than it took you to read this. At that point, I was pretty much done, as were many others. But the final nail in the coffin didn't come until the following Tuesday, when the big announcement was scheduled to be made. Tuesday arrived, and a handful of representatives from investment firms were present. Oh, neat! This should be interesting. Pamphlets and memorandums about retirement investing were passed around. Maybe they were planning to roll our profit sharing into our retirement plans, and with less overhead, we would be raking in retirement money. That would be awesome, I thought at first glance. Then the presentation began. The investment representative went through all the finer points of why retirement investing is important, blah, blah, blah. Finally, he got to how our money would be invested and mentioned that the company would match our investments up to 50%. And that was it. No further explanation. Being the stubborn person I am, I raised my hand when they asked if anyone had questions and said, "You mentioned up to 50%. Please explain when that up to portion applies and where I can see when and how it happens." He quickly pointed to some information in one of the pamphlets we had been given and said it was all detailed there. Now, when someone refuses to give me a straight answer, I get serious red flags. When the data I am told to read has no charts or hard numbers, I get even more suspicious. Luckily, story problems were one of my best scoring tests back in school. I started making notes of the numbers and timeframes mentioned in the pamphlet and began sketching a rough graph, plotting time, investment size, and the allowed percentage. I raised my hand again, asked to come up to the whiteboard, and started drawing the graph in front of the room. At that moment, the CFO, now the new CEO, got up and left the room. It turned out that when you signed up for retirement, you were limited to a few $100s a year for the first few years. You also received absolutely no matching funds for the first 3 years of the program. Once you did meet the criteria for matching, it started at a paltry 2.5% and did not reach 10% until the 10-year mark. From there, the percentage increased dramatically each year until at year 15, you reached the maximum 50% matching contributions and could contribute up to 30% of your income, which was also on a similarly absurd sliding scale into the retirement program. At first glance, you might think, that doesn't sound too unreasonable. Normally, you wouldn't be wrong. But consider how many people in the company had been there more than 15 years. The CEO, his secretary, the CFO, and the payroll and bookkeeping manager. That's it. And of course, this plan was retroactive to total years worked, meaning that this horribly hockey stick-shaped investment graph only truly benefited those at the top of the company. And then it hit me. The memory of an impromptu conversation I had with the CFO in the warehouse shortly after I joined the company. He asked how I was doing, and I said I was excited because I had just received my first profit-sharing check. He asked how much it was, and I told him it was just shy of $850. He then asked how long I had been there, and I said just over 4 months. There had been a profit-sharing distribution just a few days after I started, so I didn't have to wait long to get mine. Even though he didn't sound dismissive, or at least I didn't think so at the time, he said, "You know, the CEO only gets about $1,000 on his profit-sharing check? Seems a bit unfair that he's been here since day one and only gets $150 more than you when he has done the most work to give you this opportunity." Still being relatively new, my response was something along the lines of, "I am very grateful he has given us the opportunity and is generous enough to share the company's success with his employees." He just smiled at my answer and went on his way. But as I stood there making the investment brokers sweat while I drew this graph, I remembered that earlier conversation and the CFO leaving in a huff. I thought, "You son of a bish. This is your personal way of getting your money back from all those undeserving employees and going full tilt to rig the system to pad your own nest egg. First, you maximize the profit-sharing pool by trimming operational costs through perks. Then you eliminate the possibility of anyone else receiving profit sharing. Next, you ensure that workers in high-turnover parts of the company never see a single dime of the profit-sharing pool by excluding anyone who hasn't been there for 3 years. And finally, you give maximum fund matching benefits to the 4 people in the company with the highest salaries, allowing them to gobble up the vast majority of the company's profits in their own retirement funds. The owner and former CEO probably wouldn't even take part, since he and his family's other businesses have them set for life, and then some, meaning even more for him. After the meeting ended, I went to my supervisor and told him I would work through the quarter, as it was our busiest, and then I would be leaving the company. He pleaded with me to stay and assured me it would be for the better. 2 months later, I was asked to resign, which I did without hesitation. The place was turning into a petty mess. This, of course, dismayed my immediate supervisor. A humorous side note, my old supervisor left the company 3 months later, citing differences with management and an inability to properly motivate and inspire his team because of it. We shared a laugh over a beer a couple of months later when he apologized. All said and done, 6 years after I left the company, aside from the CEO, the former CFO, his secretary, the purchasing manager, the dropship manager, and the head of research and development, no one else I knew still works there. The place has become a complete revolving door employer. I am certain that the CEO is still taking his cut of the profits and pumping every possible dime into his retirement fund. And said, the company brought in new investors, greatly expanded its distribution and product lines, and is making more money than ever. I am sure there are plenty of people who think he is a genius. To the rest of us who worked there before his reign of terror, he is a fool who drove the joy of working for a great company straight into the ground. Story 3. I basically told her about the conversation and how rude he had been to the apprentice. As I explained it to him, they tore him apart. My timing was completely off, though. This was right before summer when most of the staff leave. On the last day before summer, he stopped talking to all of us. In the following days, we were the only people on site. It was all-out war. No more tiptoeing around minor comments. He came at us full force. He called the apprentice gay and joked about him never finding a girlfriend. He once again insisted that we were all going to hell. Every job became 100 times harder because he argued, was spiteful, and rude in every interaction. I don't know why he thought he could get away with it, but I reported him immediately. We had to wait one painful week before a member of senior management returned and essentially pulled us apart. During that week, I felt as though I grew up a little more. I already had 2 children at the time and was happily married. I was far more mature than him, even though he was older than me. I had never argued like that with anyone in my life. These arguments were so heated and aggressive, him trying to get under my skin, and me making it clear that he could not get away with treating us that way or threatening us. I never raised my voice. All he did was shout. To answer your question, this was when my attitude changed. I wasn't being paid enough to deal with this man-child. At the end of that vile week, a member of senior management finally arrived, and we each took turns telling her everything. He told her a bunch of lies, and I am so grateful to her for seeing through them. During these meetings, we concluded that, until the head office returned, we could not work together. I was given a week off first, and after that, he was given a week off. I was so depressed, practically watching my wonderful job drain away. Quietly, I applied for another position, and as if it were meant to be, I got an interview that same week and aced it. When I returned, I learned that he had swapped out his week, so he was still there. I was back in hell, but secretly my exit was already planned. After speaking with management, they decided that I would leave at the end of the summer before everyone returned. That meant 2 more grueling weeks of misery. The other complication was that management had to inform my boss. I felt trapped all over again. He got to set my leaving date, deliberately choosing it so I would have to endure. He told me to my face, "If you leave now, it will look really bad, and you'll soil your precious reputation." He gloated about my departure in front of my coworkers and tried to make me look bad. Together with management, he created an overwhelming work plan for the 2 weeks I had left, too much for me to finish alone. Then he filed for a holiday the following week. Before leaving, he even said to me, "I hope your wife leaves you." I didn't care anymore. I hatched a plan to get this little man back. I wanted to use my brains, not brawn. What did he want? I asked myself. He wanted to see my reputation soiled, and he wanted the apprentice to fail. The first thing I did was speak with management on the first day of his holiday. I told them everything from start to finish, and then declared, "I am leaving at the end of the week, pay or no pay." I wouldn't say they begged me, but they clearly did not want me to leave. "Tough," I said. "It's over. It should have been dealt with." I took that week to train the apprentice. I spent the entire week giving him what I hoped was solid instruction. We went through everything I could think of, and together we built him a folder. By the end of the week, he was servicing switches and sorting out our servers. I was really proud, and importantly, he was happy with what I had taught him. Not bad for a week's work. He told me he planned to complain at the end of his apprenticeship and blow the lid off the whole situation. I had some heartfelt goodbyes with very close coworkers and made sure they knew the real reason I was leaving. I couldn't believe it. Most of them thought he was mad. It was so satisfying to hear that even though he kept a happy face with other employees, they still recognized he was a crazy jerk. They expressed great sorrow at how quietly we had all been enduring it. And then I was gone. I kept in touch with the apprentice. The following week, my boss returned. I wasn't there, and he had to complete all of that work by himself before the end of the week. That was my revenge. At least I managed to keep my dignity. He didn't. I heard from the apprentice that he completely lost it and demanded that they bring me back to finish the work. They asked, and I politely declined. It was like, "This sigh, child wishes for your assistance." Why they didn't fire him is beyond me. I moved on to my new job after a 2-week holiday. I was on a beach, and he was losing it big time. It felt great. I wish I could tell you that's where it ended, but it goes on. A few weeks later, I had a private gathering with some former colleagues. My apprentice, worried, pulled me aside. He told me that my old boss had said he wanted to hurt my family. I should have gone to the police then, but following advice from coworkers and not wanting to make a big deal, I instead called my old workplace. They told me, "Do not call the police. We will deal with him." The company was well known and respected, and I understood their concern. Having the police show up for an internal staff matter would not go unnoticed. I don't think anything came of it. I realized it was probably easier and cheaper for them to see me leave than to take action against him. His abuse continued, and he hired a friend of his as my replacement. Apparently, he made a total farce of the interview process and got this zero-experience friend in the door to provide backup in the office. The interview was completely rigged. Cringe. Whatever. Whatever. I had to pass my old workplace on the way to and from my new job. We would often encounter each other on the road. While I was walking, he would be driving, honk at me, and flip me off. He did this frequently. One time, I had to cross at a traffic light. He pulled out into oncoming traffic and headed straight toward me, looking directly at me. The lights turned red, forcing him to stop. He held his horn down at me as I crossed, thrashing around in his car. I thought he might get out and attack me. I really wanted to call the police, but I didn't. I simply gave him a look that said, "Really?" and he responded with a psycho scowl. I told my friends, and the story made its way into the building and up to the head office. He got another reprimand, I think, because that behavior stopped. I then started getting harassed on Facebook by some kid. After some digging, I found the connection and simply blocked and ignored him. So childish. I lived in fear for a little while, worried this psycho might show up on my lawn in the middle of the night and attack me or my family. The last thing I said to this friend of his was something like, "Any more crap, and I am calling the police." Since then, everything has stopped. That sad jerk is still there, and from what I hear, he remains very unstable. My apprentice went on to get a very decent job. My boss had wanted to see him fail. This was my retribution. Story 4. Threads like this make me sad. I used to work at a great place, and the company I work at now is great too. I had put in around 5 years and was dedicated. I was an IT professional and a network engineer. This is a long story, and it's really juicy, so if you read it, thank you. We got a new boss who turned psycho after a few months. We all saw it coming. What chills me is that he could flick a switch in his brain and go from an evil, psychopathic jerk to the nicest manager in the world in a split second. Naturally, nobody in senior management believed us, despite all our testimonies. He would trash-talk the staff, act inappropriately and pervertedly behind their backs, and then be Mr. Nice Guy to their faces. He would fall into foul moods, and I could almost feel an aura of heat radiating off him. We first realized something was wrong when he started screaming at us for chatting. We're adults, right? I was 24 at the time, and he was probably around 28. He shut us in the office and yelled at us. It was so ridiculous it was almost comical, a total farce. These outbursts only became more frequent, which did nothing to help his reputation. We had a very awkward work Christmas dinner that year. We were all thinking, what if he loses his temper in public? I have a party trick. I do tarot readings, and my coworkers had been asking me for a long time to do one, so I thought, whatever, I will do it. I went around the table, and my boss asked me to give him a reading. I did my thing. I could see it was all negative, so I told a white lie and said everything was rosy. Things were already awkward, but then he demanded the truth. I explained that it was all negative. He scoffed and said it was all bollocks. I didn't really care, but I could tell he was just trying to assert control over me. In this reading, I mentioned that his engagement could be at risk if he didn't change his behavior, and that I didn't think he was comfortable with going through with it. I wouldn't normally disclose something like that, but he was doing the crazy eye twitch thing, so I had to say something. At the time, none of us knew what that meant, but he soon made it obvious. I know Reddit often dislikes tarot, but I only do it as a hobby. I don't charge, and I am good at it. At the start of the new year, he began an open affair with another employee. It was very obvious, and it often happened in the office. Sometimes, while we were working, they would disappear into a corner and whisper like children. I confronted him, saying something like, "Stop this now, or it goes above you," and he hit back with, "What, man? Nothing's going on. I mean, what?" After that, they kept their meetings to early or late working hours, but since I often arrived early and sometimes left late, I was still the unwitting third wheel. Eventually, this developed into a fully fledged relationship. We had weekly office meetings, and one of my coworkers brought it up. He went off on another long, pointless rant, but eventually realized he couldn't justify himself. He apologized and told us his engagement was off. I was spiteful because I couldn't stand him at that point. I felt a little bad afterward, but I remember thinking, "Told you so." I was dedicated to the company at the time, and I just wanted us to maintain the high level of performance we had achieved. It's worth mentioning that I knew I was considered a key asset to the business. I was at the top of my field, and it felt great being Mr. Fix-It. Everyone knew me by name, and everyone wanted my service. It's hard not to sound arrogant saying that, but anyone who has been at that level will know the feeling. I am not trying to be big-headed. A few weeks later, he declared that he was a born-again Christian. After that, it became day after day of religious lectures, insisting that all of our beliefs were rubbish and that his God was the only true one. He got very nasty about it, telling us we were all going to hell. I complained, but my complaints fell on deaf ears. He constantly presented moral scenarios and pestered us until we answered, for example, "Would you rather shoot your mother or your father?" We had a Hindu colleague, a wonderful person who kept to himself and never engaged in this behavior. My boss, however, constantly tried to provoke him. Around this time, we got an apprentice, a heck of a guy, really eager to learn and passionate about the work. His career was born in an office from hell. By the time he started, the religious arguments were happening daily. I wanted no part in them, so it was mostly my boss and the other coworkers engaging. But they would chase the same arguments day after day, and my boss would constantly lose his mind. He abused the apprentice badly. He was extremely rude, constantly putting him down, openly admitting in front of external visitors that the apprentice had no skill, and practically relegating him to cleaning duties. There was no trust and no real teaching. He was flippant and literally looked down on him. I took the apprentice under my wing and, almost in secret, taught him. One day, my boss was so outright rude to the apprentice that I lost it. I had to approach my boss and make it clear that enough was enough, but I wanted to handle it professionally and by the book. Not once did I raise my voice during the conflicts that unfolded over the following months. I took him out of the office and into a separate room. I told him, "You can't treat people like that, especially not the apprentice. He's an external candidate, and they will eat you alive." He looked me in the eye, smug. I thought he might hit me. He did the crazy eye thing and then flat out threatened me. He said he could have me sacked and asked, "What would your wife think if you got sacked?" Then he began fabricating lies in front of me about the time I'd been spending at work and the supposed lack of quality and effort I was putting in. He told me, "Nobody around here even likes you." I knew that wasn't true. He went on to say he was going to tell senior management how badly I had been working. I pushed back and said, the staff will speak for themselves, and I could get them to if I needed to. That stopped the little jerk in his tracks. He backed down, felt threatened, and apologized profusely. I told him I wanted to see him apologize to the apprentice, made a total kid out of him. I felt amazing. I had never sparred like that before, and here was this big man yelling in my face, and I overcame him with calm but firm dialogue. He actually did it too. He brought the apprentice in and apologized in front of me. We all shook hands. I looked him in the eye and I said, "No more horse crap," and he complied. That night, I was at home when a thought hit me. What if it's a trick? I fired up my emails straight away and sent a message to someone I knew in senior management. We agreed to meet the following morning. When I arrived the next day, I was greeted by this person before I had even gotten in properly. She told me my boss had run wildly into her office that morning, wanting to talk, but she kindly declined him and said she wanted to speak with me first. That made me feel a lot better, and reminded me of the weight I carried behind my metaphorical punches at the place. To clarify, I was just trying to do the right thing. I wanted to disclose what had happened the following day. Story 5. I worked at a local restaurant in my hometown. The owner was a man-child who had only kept the place open thanks to money from his father, who was self-made. He had previously run a restaurant in Salt Lake that failed under his management, and even his wife divorced him. Now that place is thriving. He was the worst person I had ever met. He once got pulled over, refused to take a breathalyzer test, and had his license revoked for 6 months. Afterwards, he bragged about how he outsmarted the police. He hardly ever worked. He would just sit out on the floor drinking with his friends all day and call that working. When he did bother to work, it was in the kitchen, cooking, all while complaining about how hard his life was and how hard he supposedly worked. I cooked at the place. At one point, he had 2 full-time cooks. One worked 4 days a week, and the other worked 3. The one who worked 3 days covered Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Let's call him B. I mainly worked with the other cook, whom we'll call W. From 10 to 5, there was no dishwasher, so the cook was expected to prep, cook, wash dishes, and handle anything else that needed doing. The owner, War, was usually golfing, fishing, drinking, or just not working at all. The place was really busy, but because R drank and gambled his money away, it was horribly understaffed. We served about 400 meals a night, and then the crowd would stay, drinking and partying long after. B worked alone on Sundays for the first month he was there. There was no line cook and not even a dishwasher. He would ask R for help, anything at all, and R would say, Yeah, I understand. I've worked back here too, but we just don't have the money or some other excuse. After about 6 weeks of B pleading with the owner, Rod finally promised to get him some help and said they would find someone for B to train. That never happened because R was too busy drinking or just being a terrible manager. Eventually, Rod made me start coming in to cook on Sundays. It was awful. People would wait 2 hours for their food, and it would be cold by the time it got there, with tickets still piling up. Every once in a while, Rod would come back, but I quickly learned he was useless. He would say, "Keep it up, boys. We're getting there," then leave, always with a beer in hand, often already drunk. The real reason everything was such a mess was that he only had 2 waitresses and 1 cook, plus me once I started. Rod would constantly badmouth B as a cook and boast about his own abilities behind his back, all while sitting out front drinking with his friends. I remember it was the Sunday of Mother's Day. Just me, B, and 2 waitresses on the floor. Ra had gone golfing with his friends. He was supposed to have prepped the food before I arrived, and even before B started his shift. Turns out, he didn't. He'd left the lobster sitting in the oven and forgot all about it. Luckily, he didn't burn the place down. When I got there, B was doing his best to figure things out while handling everything else. Honestly, he did a great job considering the chaos. As the night went on, things started getting out of control. We called Air to come in and help in the kitchen. When we finally got him on the phone, he was furious. The last thing I heard him say was, "A guy can't even get in a decent game of golf around here." When he finally showed up, he didn't step foot in the kitchen. He just grabbed a drink and parked himself at the bar while we drowned in tickets. There was no consistency in that place. If you came in Wednesday through Saturday, the food came out one way. On the other days, it was completely different. This frustrated both cooks. Turns out, Ra was bad-mouthing B in front of W in front of B. Classic divide and conquer, all because he didn't want to take responsibility or get his act together. After being disrespected and underappreciated for so long, Ben finally quit. He wasn't even being paid as much as W, and R didn't think he was a good cook for some reason. The breaking point came on a holiday night when Ben was left completely alone in the kitchen. Ra was supposed to help but chose to get drunk instead. That night, B finally snapped. He grabbed R's own knife, slammed it into the cutting board, and snapped the tip clean off. Ra was furious. But before he could fire him, B quit on the spot. At first, the owner brushed it off, saying it wasn't a big deal and claiming he'd start putting in the work himself. That lasted about a week. Then, he started asking me to come in and help him in the kitchen. At first, it was 5 in the evening. A week later, it was 1 in the afternoon. Before long, I was running the whole kitchen while he sat out front drinking with his friends. There'd be no prep done, nothing ready. Every day was a mad scramble just to keep things moving. That's when it really hit me how hard B and W had it and how much I hated R for making it that way. Remember how I said his parents were the reason his business stayed afloat? Well, his dad's best friend was also an investor. Around the same time B quit, the bookkeeper walked out too. Raj brushed it off. "No big deal," he said, and tried to handle it all himself. Big mistake. He didn't keep proper records, botched the taxes, and the fallout landed on his dad's friend. That, in turn, brought his father down on him hard. After that, his parents started showing up from time to make sure things weren't completely falling apart. Like I said, a man-child. He even had an uncle who trailed behind him, constantly cleaning up his messes. For example, Art, a friend, wanted to buy a pontoon boat in Tennessee, even though the story takes place in Montana. His uncle offered to pick it up. He arranged for it to be transported to Salt Lake City, drove there himself, and brought it back. Then R decided he didn't want it. Not wanting his effort to be wasted, the uncle bought it himself. Now R and his friends use the boat all the time. On top of that, his parents bought him a brand new house and paid all the bills. This happened twice. The sewage backed up and started spreading everywhere. The first time, it was outside. We stayed open, and R had his uncle crawl into the septic tank and clean it out with his hands. Of course, he complained that it wasn't being done correctly without offering to help himself. A year later, it happened again, this time coming up from a drain behind the bar. Waitresses were walking through it. The place stank, and no one was happy. Roz still insisted we stay open and forbade us from telling the customers. This happened on a Saturday. The next day, Rad went out boating, and the same thing happened around 6 p.m. We were told to stay open again, but couldn't run the dishwasher. Dirty dishes kept piling up as we discovered more. By the end of the night, when the kitchen was finally clean, he told us we could leave and just walked out. The problem was, he expected the dishwasher to stay all night and handle the entire pile. We had temporarily fixed the dishwasher, which had stopped bringing sewage up from the bar area. The cook I had recently hired, and I stayed to help the poor dishwasher. Side note, that same dishwasher had to help clean the septic tank with R's uncle earlier that day, and once it was fixed, R expected him to do 5 hours worth of dishes at 11 p.m. On top of all that, or would scream and yell at employees for no reason and constantly complain about how hard his life was. I could go on forever with stories of how awful a person he was, but I can't stand to think about it. Story 6. There was a moment, but it was more of a nail-in-the-coffin thing. Sorry, this story is long, but these wounds haven't fully healed for me. If anyone reads this and offers a kind word, I would be immensely grateful. I am a software engineer. I interned at Big Co for 2 summers rhyming with Pike Grows Soft and accepted their job offer upon graduation. $100,000 straight out of college is nothing to sneeze at. I had always been strong at writing software compared to my peers, and I felt like I was finally getting the chance to show what I could do. I truly felt like I was going places. I started in March at 2013. 3 months into my dream job in June, everything I loved was stripped away in a reorganization. The perfect team, the perfect boss, and a project I genuinely cared about. I was now assigned to a product that no one inside or outside the company liked. Except for the salary, everything that had made me excited to work there was gone. That was the day I had my first panic attack. My new boss was a jerk who never let me finish a sentence. He blew off most of our one-on-one meetings, and during the few we did have, I never got to say what I needed. My entire team moved elsewhere, but I was the only one who hadn't yet been there a full year. Company policy required that I work a full year before moving voluntarily, and I also had to stay the full year to avoid repaying my signing bonuses. By November 2013, my boss and the last of my teammates had left. For one Friday, I was the sole member of a team of 1, reporting directly to a director. I had no one to go to for questions or support. I even visited my old team's offices just to avoid feeling completely inadequate. I fell behind on work and was constantly criticized. The following Monday, the company hired someone from outside, but it wasn't the same. I now reported to a director, a relatively agreeable person who, while pleasant, was not particularly he. Right before my first year was up, in March 2014, a new boss was hired. People were shifted from other teams, and the jerk who had managed the team closest to mine, dragging down morale, was quietly fired. We started a new project. I got close with a young woman I worked well with. She was married, so nothing serious, but if her clone had dropped out of the sky, I would have put a ring on her. For the first time, I felt on equal footing, and people stopped dismissing my ideas. I began delivering features rapidly, with singular focus. I helped my coworkers understand both my work and theirs. I refused to compromise on quality and worked hard because I didn't want another project full of frustrating compromises. I had about 3 months where I felt like a rock star. Everything I touched turned to gold, but my home life was unraveling. My fiancé began picking fights over trivial things and gradually withdrew from the relationship. I dove even deeper into my work. Over the next 3 months, I was still performing well, but I began to slip. In August 2014, I discovered my fiancée was having a series of affairs, enjoying herself with other men while unloading hurtful feelings on me. I started to fall apart. Just as I was beginning to lose my grip, I received a promotion, a $12,000 raise, a $12,000 bonus, and some stock options. I spent most of the bonus moving my ex out of my life. She had not worked while living with me and refused to lift a finger to move. The money mattered less than finally having peace. She was gone by November. I started having panic attacks at work. More reorganizations meant the project where I had shone was moved to another team. My team had built a stellar reputation, so we were tasked with picking up the slack on a failing project. Now with many more teams, far more oversight, more bureaucracy, and far less enjoyment. The panic attacks became a daily occurrence. I began 2 months of disability leave in the last week of February, the same day my close coworker left to escape the failing project. When I returned in late April, I began to regain some normalcy. My boss had good things to say about my progress since returning, and I thought I could adjust. But in September, I was told I would receive no bonus or raise, a reward typically reserved for the very worst employees, and that our private offices would be replaced with a large open-plan layout. That was when I lost all hope. My job had become nothing more than a paycheck. A year of psychoanalysis provided many insights. Along with a long-standing battle with depression, I was diagnosed with PTSD. I cannot function in open-plan offices, especially on short notice with no accommodations. My boss sat directly behind me, and being watched makes me extremely anxious. I startle easily and cannot concentrate. I tried to work with him to find a solution, but eventually he effectively told me that I would be excluded from the team if I did not sit at my desk all day in this impossible environment. I know I have rights under the ADA, so in December I attempted to get HR to help assert them. Our outsourced HR team sent a boilerplate email about ergonomics. I then spoke to the director, who had once been my boss, makes $500,000 a year, and holds a title few ever reach. His advice? Find a way to cope. Apparently, my rights only exist if I am willing to go to court, which I am not. I went on winter vacation. On my first day back, I took a vacation day. I simply could not bring myself to come in. On the second day, I was so frozen by fear that I could do nothing but play solitaire. I burned through all my paid time off, and when that ran out, I quit. My career is in the toilet. I interviewed with Google last week after their recruiters had been chasing me for 5 years. I apparently received positive feedback from several interviewers, but one negative review was enough to sink the opportunity. I have no job, no leads, and immense medical expenses. I have a disorder that appears incompatible with open-plan offices in an industry that has developed a fantasy for them. I am worried I may never work again and have never felt so profoundly lost. Story 7. I have been with my current employer for nearly 7 years. I advanced quickly through the ranks and now hold a well-paid position. I am a respected member of my team and was extremely proud to be part of the company. In the early days, I genuinely looked forward to work. I was never late, often arrived early, and organized team events and outside work activities, paintball, hockey games, pub nights. It was not uncommon to spend every Wednesday from 8 in the morning until midnight with colleagues, going from work to a local bar, enjoying a few drinks, and simply enjoying life together. My manager, the one who had hired me, left, and someone from within our team was promoted to the position. This new manager was highly numbers-oriented and not a people person. For over 3 years, he frequently accused me of various issues, most of which were unfounded. During this time, I developed serious medical issues, high blood pressure, a rapid heart rate, chronic kidney stones, severe anxiety, and depression. Initially, I attributed these problems to poor lifestyle choices and believed they were entirely my fault. My doctor advised me to cut salt, eat more potassium-rich foods, drink plenty of water, exercise, and see a counselor. I followed my doctor's advice diligently. I joined a gym, got involved in code sports, and now drink only coffee and water, upwards of 4 liters a day. About 1.5 years ago, I was suspended for allegedly spending too much time away from my desk. The main reason was my frequent trips to the bathroom due to all the water I drank. I decided not to contest the suspension, as I had simply had enough, but I began documenting every time I left my desk and for how long. Shortly afterward, my manager was fired. I was overjoyed. However, the company promoted another person from within our team rather than hiring externally. For a large company, choosing 2 managers with no prior management experience struck me as poor decision-making at best. Meanwhile, I was dealing with bronchitis, low energy, and ongoing kidney stone issues. My blood pressure remained high, and overall, I was in very poor health. In March, my new manager held a single meeting with me to discuss some minor issues. He assured me I was doing a good job. For the next 3 months, there were no issues, no meetings, no emails about performance. Nothing. I felt like I was back on cloud nine, enjoying work again. Then, in June, everything changed. Rumors began to spread that I was being investigated for an argument I had with a coworker and friend back in April. The discussion had become heated on both sides and had not ended on good terms. Feeling confident in my manager's openness, I asked him directly whether the rumor was true. He assured me it was not. 2 weeks later, in the last hour of my shift, I was pulled aside for an investigative meeting. Present were my manager, another manager, a union representative, and my director. Neither I nor my representative had any idea what it was about. I was completely blindsided. Over the next hour, I answered detailed questions about the data they had collected on me over the previous 3 months. Since I work in a call center with numerous performance metrics, they had compiled extensive information. I left work that day, went home, did not eat, and could not sleep. I returned early the next morning, only to hear that several employees had been pulled into rooms and asked, "How did you know to tip off Hank about the investigation?" That night, I called my parents and broke down in tears, feeling as though the entire world was against me. I had spent much of the previous 3 months enjoying my career again and even pursuing further education. Meanwhile, my manager had spent the same time quietly building a case against me, essentially from the moment I started under him. I will never forget that night. I had not slept in over 2 days, and at 2 in the morning I sat on my couch consumed by racing thoughts. I began sweating profusely, felt short of breath, and my heart was pounding. Then came the chest pains. At 27 years old, I genuinely feared I was having a heart attack. I went to the hospital, explained what had happened, and was told my heart was fine. I had experienced a panic attack. When I detailed my work situation, the doctor provided a note stating, "Contact your physician, contact your employer, and inform them you are off work until cleared to return." This story is long, and there is much more to it, but that hospital visit occurred over 7 months ago, and I have yet to return to work. I am currently on long-term disability, and my doctor has confirmed that I cannot safely return to that environment. My insurance company has also agreed and opened an investigation. During the time I have been off work, my heart rate no longer races, and my blood pressure has returned to normal. However, my sleep remains disrupted, and I frequently have nightmares about work. Just last week, I woke from one such nightmare vomiting in my bed. I have not experienced a kidney stone since going on medical leave, though for 3 months immediately following my leave, I suffered 4. I am currently seeing a urologist to determine the cause. So far, they believe it is neither hereditary nor dietary, and my kidneys otherwise function perfectly. I no longer consider myself an employee of the company. I fear returning, I fear my manager, and I will never trust him again. I no longer socialize with my coworkers. My life has changed so drastically over the past 6 months that I am uncertain about the future. My self-esteem has plummeted, and I continue to struggle with anxiety and depression. Story 8. Oh God, where do I start? I was promoted to senior manager at a large university in the United Kingdom, earning close to $100,000 after years of extremely hard work, 18-hour days, and sometimes handling 150 to 200% of my workload. I didn't take a single sick day for 7 years, and even when I ended up in the hospital for 2 weeks, I continued working from my hospital bed to ensure nothing was affected. When my wife had a miscarriage and was hospitalized, I still went to work for a critical meeting that day with her permission. To this day, I regret putting work ahead of her in our family, but that's another story. I was as proud and loyal an employee as anyone could be, and my performance reflected that. I saved the company from a major legal issue and single-handedly rescued one of their most critical areas, consistently earning 5-star reviews every year of service. I had a hard but good time until a new manager arrived. He promptly bullied and harassed about 15 other senior members of the team, and within 3 months most either quit, were made redundant, or moved to other employment. People were pushed to breakdowns, suicide attempts, and depression. I am talking about individuals with over 30 years of professional experience. Having faced many challenges when I was younger gave me a certain resilience, allowing me to endure the harassment while maintaining professionalism despite the obvious bullying and hostility. I was one of the last few left to face him. One random Sunday, he called me and asked me to do 2 things. First, start the paperwork to fire a staff member who had been with the company for over 15 years because he needed someone to take the fall, and second, write a formal letter of complaint against my former boss, blaming him for issues he had inherited. Keep in mind, this was the same former boss who had supported me in my career, helped me during family difficulties, and was probably the most inspirational and decent person I had ever met. There was no way I could blame him for problems that were not under his control. I was again asked to start the paperwork to fire one of my staff members, someone who had personal issues, had become an alcoholic after marriage or other difficulties, and had recently become a father. I knew that, given his track record and current struggles, losing his job just before Christmas could push him to suicide. 3 other senior managers who had worked with him agreed it would be too much for him to handle. To put this into context, he wasn't responsible for some of the issues we were facing. He was simply the most vulnerable and easiest target. I informed my manager that such a move was, first, extremely unfair, and second, likely to have a serious personal impact on him. I warned that if it resulted in his death, it would not reflect well in the national press. His response? So what? We'll deal with it. Start the paperwork today. I knew that saying no to this manager would likely cost me my job, set me back over 5 years, and make my life miserable, which it did. But I also knew there was a little girl out there who still had her father to care for her. So, with a heavy heart, after years of loyal service and sacrificing family, friends, and my relationship with my wife, I refused, stating that we would have to wait for a formal review before taking any action. His response: "Are you saying no to me?" Mine: "With all due respect, I guess I am." He hung up. The next day, I was called in and asked to step down, and then the attacks began. Managers like that surround themselves with people who will uphold their culture and philosophy. A few weeks later, my office was cleared out without warning, and my pay was restricted, despite having an 18-month extension on the manager's contract after excelling the previous year. I was pushed to the edge of a breakdown, demoted to handle work that someone earning a quarter of my salary would normally do, all in the hope that I would quit. But for personal reasons, I couldn't, and I have battled through ever since. It's been 4 years, the longest and loneliest period of my life. On my darkest days, I remind myself that the employee I was asked to fire is still in his job. I made sure they couldn't touch him. He went through counseling and now has a beautiful little girl. She won't grow up without a dad. The manager was promoted, is firmly in place, and I've become like a ghost, once the star employee, now someone no one even says hello to out of fear of being associated with me. In the rare meetings I am called to, when they talk about innovation and new initiatives I was spearheading 5 years ago, I am ignored, treated like a pariah. I remind myself to drop the ego, let go of the idea that anyone owes me anything, and focus on my family. I am just here for the paycheck, man. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.